Hi everyone! For the 5th episode of this vegetable soup series, I'm going to check out how they make quinoa soups right where quinoa comes from. This is Peruvian chupe de quinoa, all but a boring vegetable soup. It's loaded with ingredients, but don't be intimidated by the most exotic ones, as I'll tell you what you can substitute them with. For example, queso fresco, which is fresh cheese in Spanish, so basically farmer's cheese or curd cheese. Queso fresco is a staple in Latin American cuisine, but it can be difficult to find here in the UK. However, it's so easy to make, I've been making it myself recently, instead of going to a Mexican deli. All you really need is milk, salt and vinegar. I will start by heating up a little milk in a pot, stirring every once in a while so it doesn't scorch on the bottom of the pan. While you can definitely make cheese with semi-skimmed milk as well, I recommend using whole milk for flavor. I'll need to bring it to 85 degrees Celsius, which is the ideal temperature for the curdling process. If you don't have a thermometer, don't worry. You can simply turn the heat off before it starts boiling, which you can tell because it will start to consistently produce steam and froth on top. It's not really a big problem to reach boiling temperature anyway, just as long as you don't allow it to keep boiling because 1. It might quickly spill over, and 2. The cheese might get too rubbery. In other words, just keep an eye on it. I've turned the heat off now, so I will add 40 ml of white wine vinegar. I'll stir it a bit, and it will start to curdle immediately. Once it has cooled down to room temperature, I'll place a mesh strainer and a muslin cloth over another pot, and I'll pour everything in. I'll add half a teaspoon of salt, and I'll mix it well. The more you crumble it and spread it, the smoother the cheese will be, up to a point where you can even obtain a cream cheese type of texture. So now, if you can't be bothered to make your own fresh cheese, which I can understand, or if you can't find queso fresco or farmer's cheese, the closest thing you can find in a supermarket is twarogue. However, twarogue is quite bland compared to queso fresco, so what you can do is to crumble it and treat it with salt before you use it for this soup. You could also use feta otherwise, if you want to add more character, but when you season your soup, take into account that feta is saltier than queso fresco. And now, let's squeeze all the way out. This is key to make sure that your cheese doesn't taste vinegary, and of course, the more thorough you are, the firmer the cheese will be. I'll transfer it to a ramekin. That's the closest thing I have to a cheese mold. I'll press it down with a spoon, a little, just to give it a more regular shape. And that's pretty much it, really. There you go, I made my own cheese. How cool is that? It's 215 grams of queso fresco from a liter of milk, and as you saw, it was all very straightforward. You can eat it right away if you want, but it's better to refrigerate it for a couple of hours, so it settles properly. Plus, as you know, we are here for a soup, so let's start preparing the other ingredients instead. One ingredient I would need is pasta de ají panca, a very mild chili paste that is a common ingredient in Peruvian cuisine. You can buy it online, or you can make it with dried peppers, which is what I'm doing. There should be the ají panca variety, but I'm using a couple of guajillo chilies instead. After removing the seeds, I'll boil them for 15 minutes, which will be enough to rehydrate them. Ancho chilies are also a good choice, while chipotle would be too spicy in comparison, but it's up to you in the end. Now I'll fish them out, and I'll blend them with a splash of their water. Don't worry, like for queso fresco, I appreciate that either pasta de ají panca or dried peppers aren't easy to come by, so you can use a teaspoon of smoked paprika and a tablespoon of tomato paste instead. You can strain this paste if you see that there are still loose bits of pepper skin in it. And now, the vegetables. These are 100 grams of broadbeans. Typically, you can find them frozen here in the UK. I defrosted them, and to be true to the recipe, I will only use the kernels. It's easy enough, you just hold the end where the scar is and squeeze the kernel out. But of course, you can also cook them as they are. Then I'll get some fresh corn off a cob. I'm sure there are better methods than this, but make sure you use a sharp knife if you do it this way. I'll also dice about 200 grams of butternut squash, and 2 potatoes. Then I will need an onion and a tomato, both finely diced. And of course, here's the queso fresco. I will use half of it, so about 100 grams. If you're using twarogue, remember to salt it a bit after you crumble it. And now, let's add some vegetable oil to a large pot. I'll throw in the onion and I'll saute it for a couple of minutes. Then I'll add the chili paste, or as I mentioned, you can use a teaspoon of smoked paprika and a tablespoon of tomato paste. Also the chopped tomato, 1 crushed garlic clove, black pepper, and a teaspoon of oregano. I'll keep cooking it for another couple of minutes until most of the moisture is absorbed, and then I can add the very ingredient that gives the dish its name, 100 grams of quinoa that I previously washed. It's time to throw in butternut, squash and corn, plus a couple of liters of water. It might sound like a lot, but the quinoa will absorb most of it, so you might actually need to add even more later. After about 5 minutes, I'll add a teaspoon and a half of salt, beans and potatoes, and 50 grams of green peas. Now, I should also add a South American herb called huacatai, but I will use a sprig of mint and a teaspoon of lime juice instead. I've been reading around, and they're among the suggested combinations to replicate huacatai's flavor profile. Otherwise, you can use coriander, for example. I'll let the soup simmer for another 20 minutes until all vegetables are cooked through. Then I'll remove the mint. I'll check for salt. And I'll add 2 eggs. You can break the yolks as you mix them in if you want. I'll keep simmering for 2 or 3 more minutes, then I'll turn the heat off. Now I'll pour in 100 milliliters of milk. It's also quite common to use evaporated milk instead, or you can use cream if you prefer. And finally, I'll throw in the cheese. Obviously, you can serve it with some bread or rice, but frankly, this soup is so rich already, it's a complete meal on its own. And it's not just filling, it's full of different flavors and so warming, just like a good soup should be. So, are you going to try this Peruvian soup? Let me know in the comments. And if you love soups, you can check the previous episodes of this series. I'll put the links in the description. I'll be trying more vegetable soups in the next episodes, so stay tuned. And remember, if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing. It's free and it would truly help my channel. So, where are we going next?